Yeah, we got previews. So they just like an hour ago released a 52-minute gameplay segment showing what it is. And they've also done a little preview explaining what they think. And the title of it is Crimson Desert echoes Zelda and Assassin's Creed with its action-packed open world. I mean, Zelda is going to excite a lot of people. Assassin's Creed is maybe going to calm other people down. Let's see what this actually means. I've not seen this yet. I don't know what their impressions are. What I do know and what I can tell right off the bat is that IGN quality comes and slaps us in the face once again. I mean, maybe it's just the capture is poor, but I feel like if you zoom in even a little, if you're watching this on like a TV or a bigger monitor, you can see what I'm seeing. It is compressed out the ass. And maybe it's just, again, the footage is bad, but it seems like every time IGN does anything, the footage is terrible. Anyway, let's see.
The bosses in Crimson Desert are powerful. I mean, really powerful. As the formidable Staglord grabbed me by the ankle and hurled me into a wall, Giggity. The bone-crunching impact reminded me of how the strangest blows catapulted Kratos through tree trunks and mountains in God of War. This intense, deity-like physicality lends Crimson Desert's battles a sense of genuine spectacle. These are the gladiator battles of myths. Last month, during an hour-long hands-on session at Gamescom 2024, I was able to go toe-to-toe with 3 different bosses, each of which showcased a different side to this fantasy action game's approach to battle. More recently, I was able to watch another hour of gameplay, this time a hands-off demonstration focused on exploration and questing. Together, these demos have given me a good indication of what Crimson Desert is. A game with combat that feels like a mix of God of War and Dragon's Dogma, set in a wider world where what you do is more reminiscent of the modern Assassin's Creeds and The Witcher 3. You play as Cliff, a warrior with a gruff Scottish accent and a no-nonsense attitude. After a prologue establishes a bloody conflict between the Greymanes and the marauding Black Bears, Cliff's major goal is made clear. Explore the continent of Pywell in search of his surviving Greymane allies who have been scattered following the battle. Die, Greymane! The bulk of the hands-off demonstration is set in Hernand, a medieval town populated by a fun range of fantasy races that wouldn't look out of place in any Tolkien-esque fantasy story. Cliff's interactions around its very beautifully rendered streets and roads are very much what you'd expect of a modern open-world action-adventure game.
Which, again, this is wild considering this is, like, this is not from a known, I mean, it's from a known studio, Pearl Abyss, but it's not from a studio with a track record of, like, big single-player games. They've made Black Desert Online, which is like a big MMO, but this is their first, as far as I'm aware, foray into this type of game, and they're very confident. I mean, they're showing it off very casually, revealing it to journalists for hours on end. I mean, there's a lot of big budget games where we can't get 10 minutes of gameplay before it launches, much less an hour of a walkthrough from devs within a few weeks of each other. You know, that to me encourages more confidence. Like the fact that they're willing to show it. You know, some people will be like, well, but Luke, we need to be very, very skeptical of this, and we should not believe anything they say. And it's like, that's not what skepticism is. That is just being a cynical a-hole. Being skeptical means once you have the evidence to meet the burden of proof brought by a claim, then you accept it. But until you reach that point, you don't accept it. In this case, I still don't think you should pre-order or anything. Wait for reviews when people have actually played the full game. But the fact that they're willing to show so much of it so far in advance is confidence inspiring. And I do think that bodes very, very well, because games that often look too good to be true, which Crimson Desert is often accused of, that end up being too good to be true, they usually hide away and don't show stuff. For example, like No Man's Sky, everybody thought that looked way too good to actually be true. And they kept doing the same demo over and over and over again, where they'd go to the same planet, show it over and over again. And everybody was like, I mean, why aren't you showing something new? And they're like, well, because this planet's just really pretty. That's why we like going to this planet. In reality, the rest of the game wasn't working. So to see them so flexible and so willing to share stuff, I think is really good. Yeah, the day before, they just straight up didn't have a video game, and so of course there were no previews. I don't think there were even reviews done, if I stand. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure there were no reviews. They just kind of shadow dropped it. Not really shadow drop, but they dropped the game and it was a total disaster. And occasionally, you know, there's an exception where you will get some previews. Like, for example, Redfall. Redfall had previews where some Xbox influencers, I hate the term influencer, but that's just what we're going with, they were flown out to try the game, or some of them did remote access stuff. And you remember the guys that hyped it up said this could be like the game of the generation. This could be another 10 out of 10 masterpiece from Arcane. You know, there were people who said that, who tried the game, and they were largely discredited as a result of that, because it was like crazy. It was very evident that it wasn't actually that good. It's just that people were putting on their rose tinted, or I guess green tinted glasses, hoping that it would be amazing. But with this, it's not just behind closed door stuff. They're sharing the gameplay with outlets to share with people. Like I said, we've got the full 52 minutes of gameplay here that we can also go through and look at. And that's a level of transparency that I think should be praised, because that's wonderful. That's wonderful.
There's a horse you can whistle for, NPCs to be spoken to, and hostile regions to infiltrate. That last one is where Crimson Desert has a little fun, as the demo shows Cliff changing into Hernandian banquet attire in order to walk past a castle's guards unnoticed.
Oh, wait.
Seems like a permit. No clue where he got it.
We don't look like the troublemaking type.
Right, he can pass then.
Open a gate.
I love that. I love that. Why don't more games do this? Imagine if you could put on costumes and stuff as Geralt. In a game like Assassin's Creed, this also makes way more sense. Like, why the hell haven't Ubisoft done that? Like, that's so obvious. Oh, you're an assassin. Maybe sneak in socially instead of just free running up the wall. Wouldn't that make sense? That's the problem. It makes too much sense.
Much like how you can wear disguises in games like Hitman and Kingdom Come Deliverance. I hope there are plenty of opportunities to do this, and various outcomes to your trickery. It would be fun if you could use disguises to open up new conversations, as well as gain entry into forbidden areas. Inside the castle, Cliff pilfers an Abyss artifact, which is where Crimson Desert gets a little more unusual. The device opens up a pixelated portal in a wall, and walking through it transports Cliff to the Library of Providence.
I see the Assassin's Creed comparisons now. It's like, oh, it's historical, but also sci-fi at the same time. Ooh, baby. This game has the typical UE5 dim lighting. Is it Unreal? Is it Unreal? I don't actually know. I'll Google it.
There, an alchemist called Alaston reveals that the library is at the center of all worlds, and that there are beings who plan to bring everything to nothingness.
What is the reason you brought me here?
There are beings who brought chaos.
Yeah, it's their own engine. It's the Black Space engine they used for their MMO. So that's at least what DSO Gaming says.
To Providence. The rifts they have created will return everything to nothingness.
While I can't say I'm impressed by Crimson Desert's writing in this demo, this exchange and several others feel cluttered and wrapped up in themselves. But it does point to a much grander, more mythical plot beyond Cliff's hunt for his allies. That ambition of something larger is made abundantly clear when Alaston's ally, White Crow, gives Cliff the glider-like Crow Wings ability, which allows him to leap off the library's floating island and reenact the Zelda Tears of the Kingdom's title sequence.
And we also, I mean, we've seen, like, you've played games with bad pop-in and stuff before. I will say, it is ridiculously impressive for any game to be able to pull off something like this with high levels of graphical fidelity. I mean, that's why everybody was saying when Tears of the Kingdom came out, you could jump from the Skylands, and just dive straight down into, like, the underworld seamlessly. It was ridiculous, especially on a Nintendo Switch. The fact that they could get that working, it was outrageous. And, you know, it shows the amazing talent of their programmers and everybody working on that game. But the fact that they have a similar thing working here, is also very, very impressive, because it is not easy to stream in all of this data in a way that doesn't look crappy. Like, it's so easy to just have a sphere of detail, and then it's like, okay, all the trees past that point don't spawn in, or a little sprites or whatever. This actually looks really good all the way down.
It's a little bold to use this motif. Can developer Pearl Abyss really craft something that lives up to the wider meaning of that iconic visual? But even if it falls short, the magnificent view and subsequent glide to Earth is a thrill all the same. Back on the ground in Hernand, a local peacekeeper tasks Cliff with finding and eliminating some local bandits who fight using a red mist. Heading out in search of such villains, Cliff comes across a burning house and throws nearby vases of water to save the clergyman trapped inside.
Throw the vase!
It's not clear from the demo if such objectives organically occur around the map, Red Dead Redemption 2 style, but what is soon clear is that this blaze is the work of those aforementioned bandits. The local church says one of their men, Hubert, fled the scene in an attempt to bait the enemies away, and asks Cliff to find him. The payment is another one of those Abyss artifacts, once again suggesting that the worlds beyond worlds are of vital importance to Crimson Desert's story. I hope this results in a decent amount of weirdness that helps set the largely typical setting apart from other fantasy games.
I can't believe it.
Hubert is found at a bandit camp that allows the demo to show off Cliff's stealth abilities. It's pretty classic stuff and looks very reminiscent of silent takedowns in the Assassin's Creed games. Not particularly challenging, but an alternative option to Crimson Desert's more publicised melee brawls. Hopefully when we go hands-on again, stealth will prove a worthwhile addition rather than a shallow tacked-on extra. With Herbert freed, Cliff is approached by the goblin Shakatu, a merchant of the Gold Leaves Guild. He explains that the Gold Leaves are currently under the command of the evil Splithorn. In return for killing this toxic leader, Shakatu offers money and his services. Things Cliff believes will be helpful in finding the missing Greymanes.
I merely wish us to turn over a new leaf. A return to our former glory.
Arriving at the Goldleaf camp, it quickly becomes clear how all these quests are linked. The Goblin Guards use red mist as part of their battle tactics, and so reveal themselves as the very same miscreants that were causing trouble for the people of Hernand. And so Splithorn's death not only allows Shakatu to take over and help Cliff, but also fulfills the task set by the Peacekeeper back in town. I hope Crimson Desert features plenty more of these overlapping storylines, and forms a wider narrative that feels enjoyably interlaced. That would certainly make up for the uneven quality of the writing shown in the demo. Splithorn acts as the culminating boss fight of the hand.
I mean, I do love the idea of more overlapping quest lines where you get multiple objectives where it's like, okay, investigate this, do this, we've had this happen, help us. And the answer could be the same. You know, it would be like, almost like in Red Dead, there's the serial killer quest line, but more integrated, where it's like, imagine going to various towns and they're all telling you about these bandits that keep coming and robbing them and their trade routes and stuff. And then, of course, it's just one group of bandits, a really big group of bandits, but you clear that out and then the whole village, like the 3 villages surrounding that trade route, are now freed up and thank you. That kind of thing just makes sense. And a lot of games tend to just keep it very isolated, where it's like, okay, this town and village, even though it's like 500 meters away from the next town over, it's a totally different bandit group that's causing the issue and you just have to go fight them off individually. But it would make more sense for there to be overlap. So I think that's cool.
Hands-off demo, which brings us to the much more exciting side of Crimson Desert. He's agile and aggressive, wielding a sword that emits blasts of wind in vertical and horizontal patterns, forcing Cliff to dodge and block as he attempts to close the distance. But he's a pipsqueak compared to the brutes I face myself in the hands-on demo at Gamescom. The first of the 3 bosses I clashed with was the Stag Lord. He's a relentless attacker, charging across the battlefield like a bullet train that can suplex you at its final destination. But despite his endless strength and capacity to throw you like a baseball, he's only human. I forced distance between us, quickly firing explosive arrows to knock him out of his attack pattern and open up a window to bury my blade in his back. The Stag Lord proves a real challenge of a fight. Crimson Desert is not even remotely as Souls-like, but it's not afraid to make you work really hard for victory. I spend much of the lengthy fight learning the complexities of its combat system. Similar to this year's Dragon's Dogma 2, there's no lock-on, and so I have to be mindful of where I position Cliff and where his sword will land. Rolling forward allows me to instantly follow up with a sweep kick that surprises my foe, and then hitting both the light and heavy attack buttons together unleashes a wide, particle effect spraying strike that cleaves a chunk out of the Stag Lord's health bar.
I'm just wondering what the creative choice is in a game like this to remove a lock-on. I don't know, like sometimes the lock-on can be more trouble than it's worth, and it can cause people to get frustrated that the camera is not doing what it needs to do. Like even in a game like Monster Hunter, there's weirdness with the lock-on. It doesn't work super well a lot of the time, at least in World, but I wonder what their reasoning is here.
This is speedy without sacrificing weight. It feels fantastic, but it's also easy to let things run away from you. I soon realize I need to be chowing down on health restoring food with addiction-like frequency. With the Stag Lord defeated, I take his mighty sword and shield, and the demo skips me ahead in the story, throwing me into snow-coated lands. Here, Cliff is looking for children who have seemingly been sacrificed to some kind of mountain spirit. Such a spirit turns out to be the White Horn, a sort of antlered, abominable snow deer that acts as the first showcase of just how different each of Crimson Desert's bosses can be. This colossal creature moves like a bucking bronco, and its galloping charges cause the mountains around us to break out in miniature avalanches that leave me temporarily frozen in place. Thankfully, after striking it so much that its white fur is stained almost completely red, I'm able to clamber onto its back in the fight's second phase and stab away at its flesh. The moment once again had me recalling my battles with towering monsters in Dragon's Dogma 2 earlier this year.
Dude, I love Dragon's Dogma 2's combat. It's so good. I just wish there were more monsters and stuff to fight. But yeah, I really do like Dragon's Dogma. I think I mean, this stuff looks wildly impressive. There's no doubt about that.
Unlike the little split horn back at the Goblin camp, these much larger bosses have 3 health bars, with each one eliminated increasing the intensity of the fight. But where the Stag Lord and White Horn scraps seem to escalate much like many other action game boss battles, my final battle against the Queen Stoneback Crab demonstrated Crimson Desert's ambition to create memorable moments through very different mechanics. The Queen Stoneback Crab is colossally big, it fills the screen, and smartly, you can't fight it by just hacking away at its shins. Instead, the battle is a puzzle set piece that's clearly inspired by Shadow of the Colossus. I clamber onto the crab's stony shell and grab onto the grass and flora that forms its fur, holding on for dear life while pulling myself up towards a trio of rock formations.
Look at all the
Using a
goo.
special punch skill, I shatter each of the rocks to expose a weak point that I plunge my blade into. Each open wound causes a geyser of water to blast out, which not only provides a visual spectacle, but also throws me high into the air. From above, I'm able to float down using the Crow Wings ability and plan on how to tackle the next stage. Now I'm tasked with destroying the pottery-like crown at the peak of the crab's mountain-like shell. A task completed by swinging Spider-Man style from a web and colliding with the pottery at full speed. It's all delightfully bonkers. My hour-long session wasn't quite long enough to try all 4 of the bosses the demo had to offer, but a video presentation provided a quick insight into the only one I missed, the Reed Devil, a weird little guy who creates copies of himself that can only be defeated by destroying totems that are built during the battle. Along with the 3 I fought, all 4 bosses make a promise that Crimson Desert features an array of creative, unique centerpiece battles. If they're all like this, then Pearl Abyss could really have something special on its hands. I'm similarly impressed by the combat system's fundamentals. Yes, it's all quite Fantasy 101. Bows, swords, shields, parries, but it's all delightfully aggressive and properly impactful. There's a seemingly deep combo system too, and it's because of that I wish the demo had had a section that was a little more relaxed for me to sample. The heat of a relentless boss battle isn't quite the space to learn and perfect button sequences, but I've got a good feeling you can pull off some cool stuff based on the combos that I did learn. It's a big green light for Crimson Desert's combat then. As for its adventuring chops, things are looking a little more conventional. Pearl Abyss certainly seems to be making a solid enough transition from the MMORPG design of Black Desert Online into single-player territory. But I don't think anything shown in the hands-off demo particularly breaks new ground. Much of it is very familiar if you've played the likes of Assassin's Creed or The Witcher 3. Nonetheless, it does look largely well put together. While I do hope that the Abyss artifact storyline goes suitably off the wall, I'd like to see the more typical...
Yeah, I mean, and just look at that shot. Like a large villa. We've got aqueducts or just ramparts. We've got a big city over there. It looks like another city up behind the camera over there. Another big fortress over there. I mean, It's pretty impressive. They're doing a lot here.
Fantasy storylines find suitable hooks to ensure regular gameplay feels more varied and creative than what we've seen so far. With a combat system that shifts from classic sword and board action to slingshotting Spider-Man style round a walking mountain, the questing and exploration side of Crimson Desert ideally also needs to aspire to that kind of diversity. But even if it doesn't, this latest slice of gameplay certainly suggests that the bridges between epic boss battles will be solid, if not the most memorable aspect of the experience. For more from Crimson Desert, check out the entire 52-minute gameplay demo. And for everything,
I mean, I think it's looking really good. I do think it's going to be one of those games where probably the writing is pretty forgettable, which is kind of standard with a good number of MMOs where it's just like you're playing for the grind. You're not really playing for the individual story. Some games, you know, are exceptions to that. I've heard amazing things about like Final Fantasy 14 Online, so maybe, you know, there are exceptions to it. But this strikes me as one of those games that is about the exploration, about the gameplay first, and the story is kind of an afterthought, which is not inherently bad. It's just, it means that not everybody's going to connect with it, you know? Yeah, Christian, I think you're right. I can imagine this having a boring main story, but amazing side missions and world events. Yeah, I think so too. And Sumaya, also, thank you for the super chat. Crimson Desert is a game that Valhalla team wanted to make, but had to make Assassin's Creed. I mean, it looks really, really promising. My problems with Valhalla
Assassin's Creed Valhalla
are numerous, but one of the things that this game seems to be doing really well is tying together a bunch of different gameplay systems together for individual interactions. So even against like that crab boss, the stone crab boss that he was showing, you're using the crow, fly, float ability. You're using some sort of Spider-Man-like ability to swing around on webs. You're using a punching ability that you unlock at one point to break the stones and to break into weak points. So they're using all sorts of different little things you've unlocked along the way and tying those into an encounter. Whereas I think a lot of other games, especially like more pop culture action RPG type games, or adventure RPG rather, they'll often try to build every encounter so anybody can complete them at any point. And that means that they all kind of end up playing the same, where it's like you just hack away at it until it's dead. There you go. Problem solved. Even like Valhalla did that, where they had these like legendary beasts that you could go hunt, and it was just, you know, oh, it's a big boar, hack at it until it's dead, you know, and just not much more complexity to that. But it seems like this at least has a lot more nuance to it, which I appreciate. As I found with Assassin's Creed games, I'm assuming, what I find a little off that pulls me out of the story is the futuristic parts. You're playing it, and after a couple of them, I'm just wondering when the next break in the story does throw me off wanting to play a game. I mean, I've gotten flack for saying this before, but I am primarily interested in Assassin's Creed for the historical settings and exploration. The Isu storyline, the modern day storyline with Abstergo, has just never really interested me that much. There were a couple of times back in like 2014 with Unity and with Black Flag, for example, where they did some interesting stuff with the Abstergo storyline, but all told, I'm just not that into the modern day stuff. I'm just not. If I'm playing a Viking Assassin's Creed game, it's because I want to be a Viking. You know, if I'm playing a game set in ancient Egypt, it's because I want to be in ancient Egypt. Jeez, man, he got messed up. Look at that. Golly. What's wrong with IGN's video capture quality? I've actually spoken to IGN employees about this in the last like couple months, just about capture quality and how these things are done. And I think a lot of it could be the game itself. Okay, I want to be completely fair. It's not always IGN's fault, despite how easy that is. One of the giveaways is if you look at the stalks on really thin things in a frame and then smooth motion going over top of it, if detail is just completely lost, sometimes that can be indicative of just a low resolution, and then the codec from the encoder is causing issues. So here, if we even toggle forward per frame, you can see the stalks on these little reeds are coming in and out of existence from frame to frame. And it's because occasionally there's a keyframe where everything is encoded in full detail. And then the codec will basically try to just save memory by blocking this off. This stays the same, but this stays the same, which is why it's chunky and blurry. But this area is moving, so we need to spend some of the data that we have allotted to us for this frame and encode more detail there. And so a lot of this to me looks like a codec issue, but then at the same time, there's other stuff if we zoom out onto another spot, like in the trees, where it just seems like the game is, I don't know if it's using like DLSS or an FSR or something to upscale to a higher resolution or something, but there's other artifacts that you typically see, like up here in the tree is a good example. You typically see in upscaling, not just video codec. So if you look at around this tree, you'll see some ghosting as we go frame to frame that you can see often with like DLSS or usually FSR. You can also see it around here, this sort of like hazy thing around here where it's trying to predict where it needs to be on the next frame. So you get weird ghosting like right there. You see that? So that makes me think it could be an upscaler issue, because that type of ghosting typically doesn't just happen from an encoder, in my experience. If you have an encoder doing this to your footage, something's very, very wrong. So my impression is that it's probably a little bit of both. I would guess that this footage is directly from the developers. I don't think that IGN captured this video. They do have a history of encoding things poorly, where they'll encode it at like 1080p 30. Apparently, I think it was Engadget. They did like a big reveal for the PlayStation 5 Pro yesterday, which, as you know, the whole point of the reveal was that it's like 4K 60. It can do 4K 60 on everything. It's amazing. And apparently their like reveal video that Engadget did was at 1080p 30. Like their version of the video was that poor. They have like some intern encoding the videos who has literally no idea what resolution is, what frame rate is, or what bit rates are. Like at that point, it was CNET, not Engadget. Okay, I stand corrected. That's right, it was CNET. Yeah, it's at that point, I don't know how you keep your job. You know, like that is such a basic 101 content creator thing. Like I don't even know. Yeah, and they used Windows Movie Maker to edit the video. Yeah, probably. Like, no, it's really good. I edited it on my cell phone. Didn't you see in Apple's presentation? It's a powerful content creation device. Tim Cook said so. He wouldn't just lie to me. I will say, the more that they show about this game, the more it becomes real. Like I feel like the writing being probably the weak element here makes sense, because very few games can do everything really, really well. So to hear that the narrative is maybe a weak point actually kind of makes me more confident in a weird way in the final product, because it shows that they're not just faking everything. You know, does that make sense? Like it feels as though, okay, this is real. They're showing the good and the bad. The writing might not be that strong, but the gameplay does look really strong, and they're just showing us the game, so there's going to be some good and some bad. So seeing some weakness and some weak points actually, for me, makes me more confident that they're not just faking gameplay segments and stuff. This or Kingdom Come? I mean, Kingdom Come, I feel, is a known quantity. We know what that game is going to be like. It's going to be Kingdom Come Deliverance 2.0, maybe 1.5 even, but if it's just more Kingdom Come, I'm a happy camper. So I feel like we know what that one is. I think it's much more reasonable to be really excited about Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. This one, I think it's fair to be optimistic or intrigued. I still would not throw my money at them or anything, but I feel like this one, there is a lot of potential. And the fact that they're being so transparent with it, they're being very open about it, that instills a lot of confidence in me. And I mean, can you imagine if we get, you know, Black Myth Wukong that pops off? It's a Chinese developer, relatively unknown. And then this game comes out from a Korean studio, and they come out of nowhere comparatively to big kind of single player developers. And they come out and knock this one out of the park. And this sells millions and millions of copies. I think that would be really, really good for the industry, not just because we'd have more good games, but because it would give big publishers and developers like a little kick in the pants. You know, like that's the whole story of the PS5 Pro right now, is that is Sony full of themselves. Like they feel like they can get away with anything, because they kind of can. There's not a lot of competition from Xbox. So they can get away with pricing stuff crazy and taking features away from the Pro variant, you know, just pulling an Apple. So the more competition there is, the better, in my view. And so if these guys come along and are competing with the likes of Ubisoft or EA or, you know, any other publisher like Take-Two or somebody that's trying to publish big open world adventure stuff, that's good. That's good. So I like it. I want to see gameplay at night. I mean, the opening sequence was at night. This whole sequence is at night. Granted, it's the prologue, so this is like how they start the game. It's kind of like the combat tutorial. But I think that they mainly focus on the daytime stuff because they have a lot of really dense foliage. I mean, look at this. There's a lot of detail there. But this is one of those examples of a game where a really good upscaler could do wonders for this game. Because let's be honest, I'm guessing that this game probably doesn't run that great at launch on consoles. That's just my expectation. But maybe Sony's new pisser upscaler, PSSR, maybe that could actually carry the day and help it out a lot. Because like I'm looking at this stuff and like individual little lines are the worst thing for FSR. FSR sucks ass usually. But to then also have movement mixed in and then a lot of layers of those little stalks, that is a nightmare scenario for like FSR. DLSS can handle it pretty well on quality mode, but I mean, you can see a lot of graininess and stuff all in here around these frames, which to me, the graininess typically is an artifact of upscaling. That's not an artifact of the codec. The codec will make things look really blurry and blocky, whereas this type of graininess you're seeing here is an artifact of an upscaler that's trying to figure out when it's a hair strand and when it should be transparent and show through. Like this blurriness in the hair, that's a codec, that's a compression issue. But then the next frame where it's grainy, this is probably what it looks like in most frames. So I'm guessing that this is probably a key frame right here. And this is what you can expect the game to look like if you were to hit pause at any given moment, which doesn't look bad. Not at all. I mean, it looks pretty good. But I am worried about the reliance on upscalers. That would be my main concern. He took my thing.